Hello, everyone. My name is Don Means, and you are back at Libraries in Response, what we call this series that we started, 2 years ago. And have continued more or less ever since. The question that kind of kicked us all off was, remember March of 2020? It was like, what's going on? I mean, what is really all this about? How serious is this? And, it was just, suddenly we were all in lockdown and closed and wondering just how lethal and how infectious this virus was. Well, we've been finding out it's more and less. And, but the first thing was, well, okay, if we're closed, well, what is a library if the building is closed? It's not totally closed. There's still online services, and we figure out ways that, you know how it's evolved. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to hear three great stories from three excellent leaders in three states of what they've been through for the last 2 years and how they think that applies to planning going forward. The sessions have been hosted and recorded by the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions, our longtime partner in public access and doing these. The recordings are all archived on the pandemic response page at giglibraries.net. And so there are now 61 hours of recorded sessions since this all began. Our speakers today from New Mexico, Maryland, and Maine, Eli, Tamar, and Jamie, are going to share their stories with us, and we're so looking forward to it. And thank you all for being here. I'm going to run through a couple of, this is our kind of our mantra here, supporting library reinvention, where there are amazing things going on everywhere, all sizes of libraries, big and small, and doing innovative things. And that excites us, especially where the technology is involved, and more especially where communication technology is involved in enabling these various objectives that libraries have. So that's where we live, and that's what this is part of. This is the context for, of course, this is COVID 2022. It's still going. We all are feeling kind of tired of it and feeling more safe. The vaccinations, the herd immunity is building up, all these kind of things. We keep looking for positive trends, and we did with this series, we shifted from libraries in response to libraries in recovery. That was kind of last October, I think. And then suddenly here we are again, with Omicron, and now it looks like, Omicron Junior, BA2, I think it's called, even more infectious than Omicron, but maybe not so severe, but we just don't know. This is a long-term kind of outlook situation, and shouldn't be dismissed in planning. This is the curve of cases in the US over the 2-year period. And each time it started going down, we thought it was over, and then it goes up. It looked like it was going straight up last July, but then Omicron arrived and it really went up. But the deaths rates have been a little more, not quite as spiky, but still impressive and daunting that such a thing has taken hold of us and just shifted. Our entire civilization worldwide has had to conform to what this virus has allowed us to do. And it happened, just like instantly, but it's still happening. This is part of our commercial about an advocacy that we do regularly, which is for public access. Libraries are the principal provider of open access to the internet and to other digital services like e-government services, anything that might be online, plus the library internal services, of course. But there's the idea that to access those services, not the content so much, but the access part of that, you have to go to the library if you don't have it at home, right? So, but you have to go to one of these. And shouldn't these be, because it's so popular, pre-pandemic, the number was around 80 million people access the internet at a public library. I mean, that's just a phenomenal number. 1 in 3 adults, you know, either once a day or once a year, still it's super valuable. So this idea is to take that super valuable service and try to extend it out into the community, basically in every neighborhood. Everybody should live close to, you know, close to one of these signs that an access station is somewhere nearby. It could be anywhere. This is the Bibliothèque Sans Frontières project, WALI, in laundromats, which is so cool. Look that up if you don't know about it. This is maybe our favorite icon of a library kiosk, if you will. It's from Tennessee. I'm sorry I don't have the name, but you know, solar panels, charging stations, shade, comfortable place to sit, even a free little library there. I mean, it can be anything that you want. The thing is, it's convenient to people. It could be in a corner of a, you know, city hall or a community center, and it could be staffed, right? So why not? Why not actually be there to answer people's questions closer to where they are? If there's more space and more air, all the better. Then there's the mobile. So this is a related aspect of a kiosk, is a bookmobile, which are governed by the same rules as our kiosk. They're eligible. Not sure what's happening here to my screen share. I think somebody took my screen share. Allow me to get it back. Excuse me, my icons are covered up. There we go. So, you know, you can staff a bookmobile.
You're not hearing anything.
Is that, you're not seeing anything? All right, thanks again. Sorry about you.
Yes, we are not seeing anything.
Yes,
now we are.
Okay, good. Now we are. Seeing that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. As I said, it could be any number of vehicles to get out into the community. The wider context for various kinds of crises that libraries have been facing is climate change or global warming, as it used to be called. And these reports, this one is just even more severe. And we're doing, you know, kind of everything except addressing it. The other point I'd make about this is, you know, the evidence is that we've messed up pretty big time, and we're going to continue to see severe weather events, climate-driven extreme weather events, increasing in severity and frequency for the foreseeable. So that sets us up for adaptation, which we really need to think about rather than mitigation, rather than only mitigation, because it's here. This was 2 years ago. Looked like it was really going up. And then now, you know, it's more or less an average. So do we have the capability to do it? Well, you know, we love this shot. This is a photograph of the southern pole of Jupiter. And we took a snapshot, you know, 500 million miles away. We've got some capabilities, but we do also have this kind of knowledge level challenge. And this was a survey that showed that only 25% of the people surveyed after a Jurassic Park movie about 6 years ago were sure that people and dinosaurs did not live at the same time. Only 25%. All the others, you know, I put those in the same category. If you're not absolutely sure they didn't, you shouldn't have missed that day at school or whatever. The point is, if this is the level of knowledge that our country depends upon to make policy and to make rational choices, it's another hurdle. I'll just put it that way. Here's a nice graph that we found from British Columbia. It touches on a lot of adaptation elements. It's a good reference point. You can come back and watch the recording and zero in on that. But we need to get to our speakers. And as Tamar encouraged me, so I could do less blather and we could have more holding forth here from Eli, Tamar, and Jamie. So we're going to go in this order. And I am going to stop share. And I'm going to thank Tamar and Jamie and Eli for all being here. And I think we are Eli up first. Eli, thank you. Are you ready to go?
I am. Just a second, please. Technical difficulties.
First of all, welcome for the first time on Libraries in Response here. It's great to have you. Great to meet you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Good to see you all. Thanks for coming. Hello from snowy Santa Fe. It is extraordinarily bright outside because we got a bunch of snow. By a bunch, I mean for us about 1/4 of an inch, and it's very sunny outside. So I apologize for being so backlit. All right, New Mexico. This has, of course, been an interesting couple of years for us. In terms of ARPA funding, we've distributed that almost entirely to the libraries. So we passed through all of our funds so that libraries could make local decisions on ARPA funding. I've had the chance to talk to a lot of the libraries about how they've used that to respond to various challenges that we're facing. It's been really interesting is how many libraries have gotten very involved with local economic development. That's been really fascinating to watch. So a lot of our library directors are on the boards of their local Main Street group. They're actively working to develop arts and culture districts in town. They're just like extraordinarily involved in the local community. A lot of like building of outdoor spaces. They've used the opportunity to, to build gardens outside and improve their outdoor spaces for people to spend time. Pretty great to watch. Our tribal libraries have had a really tough time of it, but they've done some pretty amazing things. In San Ildefonso, the library helped get wireless internet to all of the households during the pandemic. The Pueblos and the Apache nations and the Navajo Nation have mostly been shut down, and they still are. Some of them opened up a little bit, but then they've shut down again. So visiting libraries has been pretty difficult. And the tribal libraries have faced a lot of difficulties with getting deliveries and that sort of thing. So we're hoping that they'll start to open up more, but they are wisely, for now, almost entirely closed or open only for appointments. All right, let me get into this PowerPoint. So we are at the State Library, extremely involved with broadband in New Mexico. So New Mexico is the 5th largest state, but we only have, by geography, but we only have 2 million people. So we've got these vast distances, a lot of rural areas. The Navajo Nation makes up something like 25% of the land of New Mexico. That's a really difficult area to get broadband to. So in 2018, the year that I started, we got $1 million broadband infrastructure fund. And we got a position to manage that fund. So we've seen with libraries, we've seen this extraordinary step forward in getting as many libraries as possible connected to fiber optic broadband, getting them using E-rates. We've used the fund to update all of their equipment. So, for libraries, we're feeling pretty good about broadband infrastructure. Where necessary, we've helped to create consortia with with local schools to get broadband to like really hard to reach places. The coming few months, we'll be working on a couple of projects where getting broadband infrastructure built out is particularly tricky. So we're going to be doing some special construction projects, tapping into 95% E-rate funds for at least 2 libraries in the coming months here. So one of those is Hatch, where they make the green chilies. The Hatch project is looking to be just over $2 million, but when we're going to chip in the 5%, which will be about, I think, $100,000. So it's, makes it pretty manageable and is going to really support the build out of infrastructure in Hatch. The state library is on the brand new broadband commission for, I'm sorry, broadband council is what it should say. It's a broadband council, not commission. We've had 2 meetings of the council so far, but the council is the new body in New Mexico that's tasked with getting $100 million of state funding, a lot of federal funding, and a lot more federal funding coming. So we are busy creating the rules and creating the grant program to get those funds spent as quickly as possible. On the Navajo Nation, we've worked with Dene Education in partnership with the Arizona State Library to recognize on our side of the border 49 new chapter house libraries that are branches of the Navajo Nation Library in Window Rock. Through that, they are in the process of building out, doing E-rate projects to build out infrastructure there. So we're seeing this great step forward on the Navajo Nation through the creation of libraries. So that's some really exciting stuff going on. And then I'm working closely with the Santa Fe Indian School on some digital equity projects. We're applying for some large-scale grants that would position libraries in the states as part of the digital equity ecosystem, specifically tying digital equity and digital literacy training to the creative technology, industries here in New Mexico. So we have, for example, a huge film industry. So, seeing the broadband infrastructure being built out, for example, on the Navajo Nation, opens up those communities to high-tech teleworking options. So we are going to make sure libraries can operate as the first step along a career path or an education path towards some like high skill, high paying jobs that these rural communities now have open to them because of broadband. So this year we are in the process of opening up libraries in the 3 pueblos that do not have libraries. Just yesterday, Taos Pueblo certified their tribal council, certified a brand new library on Taos Pueblo. So for the first time, as of yesterday, Taos Pueblo has a library.
Wow.
Which is awesome. Within state governments, the state library is playing leadership roles in a few different ways. We created an activity kit program where we are partnering with our sister divisions in the Department of Cultural Affairs to make coloring books, to make activity kits and get them into rural and tribal areas and get them to libraries for distribution. That's been a really exciting thing, but just one of the ways that we're working within our department. We've started to be very concerned with, or concerning ourselves with literacy efforts statewide. So we are really looking to beef up literacy, both through libraries and in partnership with the education department and the new early childhood department here in New Mexico. Let's see. I'm gonna skip to the next thing. Whoops, I didn't mean to skip that far. I can't actually see my slide because the box is in the way. Oh yes, so we've been giving out grants to libraries to work through the rural library social well-being tools that were created from the Rural Libraries and Social Well-being projects. That's a mentorship program and a micro grant program. I'm very interested in the recent research done by that project and by the IMLS's Understanding the Social Well-being Impacts of the Nation's Libraries project, which has really like opened up new windows in how libraries can make impacts in their communities. And what I find really interesting about it is that it's such a long-term view of what libraries do, which has a lot of implications for resilience. So we believe that when we're talking about libraries and resilience, it's really the long-term role that libraries play in communities. So we see, of course, you know, our libraries are almost entirely, municipal libraries. The governments, you know, governments change. With our tribal libraries, the tribal governments change very commonly every year. So we see that the library is like the one institution that's always around, that doesn't, you know, that doesn't change, that has the consistency, and because of that, plays a really key role in both social well-being and in long-term resilience, we believe. Let's see, this year we're supporting the Mexico Library Association is doing a sustainability summit for their conference, and that's going to be heavily looking at recovery and resilience. And then we have for the last few years been very involved with entrepreneurs and small businesses through the program that we co-created called Libraries as Launchpads. This is a program that we've done around the state here in New Mexico, and now it's going out to, it's been done in several other states now, and we are applying for big grants to take it to even more states. But again, we really feel like libraries are the perfect hubs for entrepreneurs and for small businesses. Again, we're tying digital equity efforts to higher education and career paths specifically. And what we really want, and this really resonates with our rural and tribal libraries, is that if someone is living in a rural small town or a small native community, we want to make sure that they have options to create for themselves a career path so that they don't have to move to the big city. You know, there's so many telework options now. There's so many high-skilled, high-tech jobs that people can be doing from rural communities. So we think libraries can be the hub to, you know, get people started on that path, and even be, you know, co-working spaces as they do it. Just one last quick thing here. Don clued me into the fact that one of our Navajo Nation libraries, the Torreon Community Library, has been part of the LEO network. They have Starlink now. They also have TV white space. They were, I think, our first tribal library, well, our first library of any type to get TV white space. And they now have been using Starlink for a number of months. They report that the speeds are very, very good. They do their chapter house Zoom meetings through that connection. They can stream videos, no problem. Right now, they're paying $500 per month. A local nonprofit is currently funding that, but that money is going to run out. So they're really sort of looking for, more funding to keep that going. That's pretty expensive for them. Or as Don and I were talking about, we would love to see Starlink become an E-rate vendor so that they can E-rate that service. And she mentioned that a big problem for them is a lack of assistant IT support, which is pretty common. And that's it for me. Thank you.
That's great, Eli, and thanks for the plug. The Torreon Community Tribal Library, Navajo Library, is part of this initiative that we've launched called LEO Libraries, where we had a certain amount of IMLS funds available as part of a prior grant, and we were able to support a handful of these projects. The world's first library connected through a low Earth orbit satellite system is the Tory-owned library. I mean, we think that's pretty cool. We will get into this whole area soon. I would say in the next couple of weeks. There's a lot of questions, a lot of possibilities about what these systems might do. I don't want to take our time today, but just keep a heads up. Jamie had a little news about it. But first, we're going to go to Tamar to hear about the happenings in Maryland. Tamar, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Don. Thank you, Eli. Thanks, everybody, for inviting me or inviting Maryland to be a part of this series. And so I have a slide deck, and it's to control my blathering. As my comments were not in any way about anything that Don does or says is my own. I've got a script, I've got my slides, I've got the timer up. I really want to make sure that I am respectful of the time you've been able to provide for us today. So let me open up that. And I just want to start by saying that I am actually not the state librarian. I am the director of the Public Libraries and State Networking branch of the Maryland State Library Agency. We are responsible for library development. I'm here on behalf of our state librarian, Irene Padilla. And so we've all been going through this together, and we've all been experiencing a lot of the same things and responding to it in the same way. And we all have to work within what is available to us to make the best use of resources to serve our communities. So I started thinking about it last night, and I'm sure somebody said this already, but this has really been a stress test of our infrastructure and our assumptions about what the state library does and how we function. And through the past couple of years, we've learned that there are some elements that we assumed were going to be really strong and really important, really stood up to the test of the past couple of years. The one thing I would really want to talk about and brag about is the strong network in Maryland libraries. There were some things that were stress tested that we realized were more important or needed tweaking or needed to be expanded as we went through things. And for us in Maryland, the one example that really came to mind was the work we've been doing with equity, diversity, and inclusion really needs to be expanded and be pervasive in all aspects of the work that we do. So let me see. There we go. So a really brief timeline of the first 5 months of the pandemic. It was really intense, and somehow in 4 or 5 months, we managed to accomplish what would normally take 2 years to do. We were working from a position of a high level of uncertainty, but somehow we relied on the infrastructure that was in place to build some really great things. The first thing that happened was that when libraries closed, a lot of the staff were really interested in how to support first responders. So people in different library systems around the state were using their 3D printers to produce component parts for PPE. We recognized this and went in and helped organize people so that they could work together and not reinvent the wheel over and over again. And then also to distribute out the materials in a meaningful way. And so this, I think, was like the seed of this sort of statewide collaborative resource building and sharing. We also realized and got feedback from our library leaders that they needed some sort of tools to provide services to our customers, regardless of whether or not they're going to be able to be in their building. So we provided a Zoom enterprise license to all the libraries in the state, including Zoom meetings and Zoom telephone, so that people could do virtual reference as well as virtual programming. We got the ARPA money really early from IMLS. We're so grateful that we were able to get that money. When we were in communication with our library systems, we realized that they were dealing with what was right in front of them and really couldn't think about what a long-term use of the funds would be because nobody had any idea. So what we did with our CARES money is that we distributed it as discretionary awards to all the library systems in the state. And for the smaller rural systems, we issued those as a block grant through the regionals so that they didn't have to take on the responsibility of managing an award as well as everything else that was going on. So we were able to get that money out within a couple of weeks, and we're really, really proud of that. And at the same time, libraries started to try and get over the shock of what was going on and explore models for providing service. What would contactless service look like? What could we do to support digital equity? How can we use our Wi-Fi networks to support our communities? In June, there was talk about a big program that one of the systems wanted to do, and we realized this was an opportunity to lean into the Zoom licenses. And so we started to create a statewide shared programming model where the library systems can contribute a small amount of money and promote events at the local level and be able to tap into virtual programming. So the first event that we had in this series, which was towards the end of July, was Ibram X. Kendi, the author of How to Be an Anti-Racist, spoke through the Prince George's County Memorial Library System. And this was a success that I don't think that we would ever be able to replicate. More than 270,000 people watched the event live, which was amazing. It was incredible that a library event went viral globally. So we're extremely proud of that and recognize that like lightning might not strike twice with that, but we have continued our Maryland Libraries Together programming. And the libraries are working collectively with and without seed money from the state library to produce programs. When we got the CARES Act funding, we got about $547,000. It worked out to be less than 10 cents a person. And like I said, we used it to support local immediate needs, and the formula we used was based on the number of branches, the budget for the library, and the population of the communities that were being served. When we got the ARPA money from IMLS, and again, I cannot be more grateful about the opportunities that IMLS has presented. We got about $3 million. We distributed 96% of that money. We kept the 4% administrative cost to do an internal project. We received $8 million in requests, and every system that asked for money received funding. We used guidance from IMLS to determine what the criteria and the categories for distribution would be. So their main focuses were services beyond our libraries, reimagining library spaces and services, addressing digital equity, diversity, and inclusion, and building infrastructure. We ended up using about half the money to support services beyond the library. And we provided substantial seed money for 14 library systems to purchase or refurbish mobile vehicles. There were already 21 mobile libraries in the state, so this will increase that by another 66% or something like that, bringing the total up to 35 mobile units. 30 to 35 mobile units around the state. So we're very, very proud of that. So digital equity, I don't know what you think about Maryland, should you ever think about Maryland, but we don't necessarily have the level of income in the state and wealth that many people might think. In fact, 23% of Maryland households don't subscribe to broadband service. 18% of Maryland households don't have computers, and more than 100,000 households with children do not have broadband. So we realized that we had to be a part of the solution. One thing that we've been able to do, and a lot of other states have been able to do, is participate in an Office of Broadband. We are working on new strategies to provide internet access. The LSTA funding has supported, LSTA and ARPA funding has supported the purchase of more than 1,000 Wi-Fi hotspots and Wi-Fi enabled mobile units, but we realized that that's a stopgap measure and that there's something else that needs to be done. So we're looking at community access points around the rural communities. And we've had some interest in exploring TV white space and Starlink. And people are working through those issues. We also want to provide staff and customers with digital literacy skills. We've purchased, like many states, North Star to support that. Digital equity and inclusion. We are a minority majority state. There is no single ethnic or racial group that makes up the majority of the state. 47% of Marylanders report as white only in the most recent census, and 6 counties making up 50% of the population are minority majority. So we realized that we needed to do things to address digital or equity, inclusion, and diversity. And so some of the things that we've been doing here is there's state law to make all libraries fine-free for children. We provided and supported statewide leadership around EDI. All of our EDI training, we're trying to work at a statewide level to provide EDI lens training, and so that everything we do kind of takes into account these factors. We are also supporting through grants and resources library level efforts, which includes doing audits of policies, of collection, and doing audits of policies, collections, programs, and facilities to remove any biases. One of the things that I'm really excited about is that we have purchased software to make all library computer staff and public accessible to low vision customers to remove the stigma of otherness from people. Service models is the last thing. Staffing models haven't changed as fast as our service models have. So we're working to address those gaps. One of the biggest gaps is pay. A lot of people in rural communities, the library systems can't be competitive with the gas station down the street. And educational credentials that may or may not actually be effective tools to provide the best level of service is something else that a lot of library systems are looking at. How can we be professionals, but maybe look at other ways to support people who may not have access to education. So we're looking at how can we support staff that may or may not have an MLS, let alone a BA? How can we support how people use the library buildings? And how can we be responsive to creating more collaborative resources? Playing to our strengths, we learned that our infrastructure for networking is really strong. There's strong public support for Maryland libraries. 57% of Marylanders in a recent poll wanted more funding for libraries. And we're working with partners by leveraging library strengths, which include market penetration and the level of trust that the library community has with customers. Our key staff are listed here. I just want to give them a shout out. They've been amazing. It's been nonstop for 2 years. And thank you.
Wow.
A lot.
That is a lot, Tamar. And first of all, my apologies for your premature promotion. I should have recognized Irene Padilla as the state librarian. I sent her an invitation and you came back, and that was where my confusion went in. But I'm sure she'll be happy with your version of the state report. This is really a lot of, both these two stories are packed with stuff, so many questions. We'll try to get to them, but we need to round out our presentations here and turn over to Jamie from Maine, where Maine is one of these states that connects all of their libraries with its own fiber network, as opposed to everybody getting it from here and there. So Jamie, welcome. Are you ready to go?
I am. Thank you, Don. And I don't have slides for folks that might be wondering
Thank you.
Share is working or not. I'll tell you, it is it is just incredible the work that libraries do across the nation. Hearing from Eli and Tamar, it's just it's awe-inspiring work, and I can never hear enough of the success stories. It's just especially after the past couple of years. So yeah, let me give you the lay of land for Maine. For anyone that attended last week or had the chance to listen to Don's session last week, there's a lot of similarities between some of my comments today and Randy's from Michigan, the state librarian in Michigan. Maine is a big state. So if you're far north, close to the Canadian border in Aroostook County, it will take you longer to drive out of the state of Maine. In the contiguous United States, that is. You could obviously drive out of the state of Maine into Canada quite quickly, but it would take you longer to get to, say, New Hampshire than it would for someone in the mid-coast area of Maine to drive to New York City. So it covers a lot of ground. And as Don alluded, one of our United States senators, Senator King, was once Governor King of Maine, and in his tenure created what has now become very robust, the Maine School and Library Network. And it connects, and it has connected, but roughly 230 libraries and about 500 or 600 schools with a minimum gigabit fiber, symmetrical fiber connection. And the way that is done is through a consortial E-rate application and a centrally managed component that we call Network Maine to help do the RFPs and manage the ISP relationships, as well as sort of, and I call it the equivalent of a state E-rate fund. So the Maine Public Utilities Commission, we actually have, there's a small fee, it's 21 cents on folks' bills, whether it's a cell phone bill or telephone bill or otherwise, and that generates about $4 million for us that we use to match E-rate and essentially provide that connectivity for free. So library, I give that as backdrop because we've really been central to providing very robust internet access. So even before we got symmetrical fiber, you know, we were the fastest thing in town, our libraries were. And that goes for some of the most rural and smallest libraries that we have. But still the problem remains that not everyone has it. And just by way of a tangential example, my family and I moved from where we were in Maine in August, the year of the pandemic, August 2020, we moved to a new home. And it was difficult to get cell connection, let alone internet connection. So major issues with my kids being able to do homework and remote schooling. Very, very difficult for me to maintain a video connection and do work. And it was just, I think it was a good experience for me to have to go through, because prior to that, as state librarian, I'm advocating for the need for broadband expansion and helping to communicate that there is this digital divide. And now all of a sudden I myself was in the middle of no access. So it's a real thing. And certainly for folks that don't have a voice, they're being left behind by not being able to connect. So let me walk through kind of our COVID timeline, which I think my colleagues have done and on previous calls. And it's a similar story, but I'll share with you what we did in Maine. In March, when things really began to close down, our Director of Library Development, Janet McKenney, wonderful Janet McKenney, who, by the way, and it is public now, is retiring. So any of you that know Janet, she's retiring in July. We'll be looking to hire a new library development director, but we are going to miss her. But she instituted a series of weekly statewide Zoom-based library meetings. And it really helped to bring adoption of video and teleconferencing for our librarians who, up to that point, were really sort of you know, it was hit and miss, and it was hard to connect. And again, I'm paralleling Randy, but we'd get 300 librarians on these calls out of, you know, 260 libraries, very well attended, far exceeding any kind of attendance that we would have gotten in person in the most recent 5-year past. So these calls were really to help communicate in a coordinated way and help make sense of the rapidly changing guidance that was coming out. And while there is local control structure of libraries in Maine and their own governance, and generally speaking, you know, the state library is not one to tell libraries what to do or how to do it, and they wouldn't have appreciated that anyway. All of a sudden, we're in a situation where, no, we were being asked, what do you want us to do? And tell us what to do. And certainly when we're working with the realm study and trying to understand contact of the virus and spreading, you know, and a lot of non-consensus, how do we navigate that? But these weekly calls really helped to bring the library community together. As a result of those weekly calls in the early going, and as a result of Janet attending on our behalf of the state library, the state agency only CDC director daily calls. So a very small group sort of, and then they would have these meetings, and then they would go public later in the day with a meeting for the public. But we were able to work ourselves into the governor's COVID plans and reopening plans and guidance, so that the libraries themselves, we actually had a checklist for libraries. So there were checklists for small businesses, there were checklists for large businesses that the governor's team was putting together, but we were able to insert ourselves for specific guidelines and plans for libraries. And it was a huge win because for a number of reasons. One, it provided a lot of guidance for libraries out there, but two, so many other organizations that weren't necessarily included in the broader plans were looking at us wondering how we got ourselves in the middle of that. Other museums, you know, other historical societies or whatever the case might be. And we were able to kind of share how we operate as a library community and tell our story. And I think there's a lot of benefits that have come from it. So much like my colleagues, we were there and using CARES funding and whatever the case might be to really help augment all of the services that came to be during that time. All of the increased digital connection services, ebooks, audiobooks, infusing funding into that to really go to where people were. Really leading by example, our library development team in shifting virtual-based programming. And then certainly as things have begun to, you know, open up, being there as well to show that, you know, it's okay to start opening, but how do we do this safely and providing that guidance there. When ARPA came to be, and I saw some folks from IMLS on, thank you so much. It's terrific, terrific funding. With ARPA, we are investing in a couple of different areas. Among the primary, we received just under $2.3 million. And the big categories of funding for ARPA are really formula-based grants, bringing more libraries, a project to bring more libraries and connect them to the Maine Unified Catalog. So about 50 new libraries, more libraries into connection there. And then the big hallmark project it's called Bendable Maine. And Lisa Shaw, you're on this call. Could you put the Bendable link in the chat for me? If you want to go to bendable.com, you'll see it. You can poke around, sort of self-guiding, but go to the South Bend instance of Bendable when you choose your library and take a look at what they offer. And really, this is a huge, enormous effort that we'll be launching. We started it last July, but we'll be launching later this summer for a lifelong learning marketplace. Think Netflix of learning. So there's community-based learning with real people with real stories that can bring forward a curated collection of learning, all the way to workforce credential-based badging types of learning that's backed by employers in our state. So that's how we're putting things together. And I'll just wrap up, Don, by saying I tend to be an optimist, and I'm optimistic about our future, but from the state library's point of view, and we'll be talking a lot about this, I'll be talking a lot about it with libraries, our bet needs to be on people, and our bet needs to be on how we reconnect with people, because I think we've lost that, and the world may never be the same, but I really look forward to making sure our spaces are designed to welcome people in, have them stay as long as they want and feel safe in doing so, and creating those conversations and those connections that happen through a human interaction, because I sure do miss it.
Fantastic, Jamie. You're right. I mean, we have definitely been disconnected from one another at a level that I think we have failed to appreciate, given the substitute of this kind of connection we're having right now, which kind of swamps us, and we think we're still connected, but I agree with you completely. We're missing personal interactions, which, they go back pretty far actually in human history. And just great stuff. Let me first echo your Bendable commercial shout out. It's an extraordinary project. Drucker Institute is backing this, great design people. It puts the library at the heart of learning in any community. It's comprehensive, learners of all ages, right? This is who else is in that business? And it's remarkable the strategy that they've taken. I hadn't heard that you're doing it. I visited those folks in their kickoff project in South Bend a couple of years ago. And so it's great. Good luck. And we'll want to get a report on that as well. A couple of things that came up. One was I think what Eli mentioned, the Broadband Commission. So right now, every state is in line for funds, federal funds. So the Fed can't really handle all this money. They don't have the apparatus actually to spend it. They can generate it through Congress, but the agencies it's too much. So in the usual way, they offload that responsibility to the states, and then of course the state agency. So it's a good news challenge, I guess we could say, because it does require a lot of attention to difficult circumstances. The fact that you're on a state commission, I think, is a COSLA recommendation to NTIA, which is the National Telecommunication Information Agency that's running a lot of these grants, that there is a plan requirement, and there should be a state coordinating body that has a librarian, preferably a state librarian, on it to inform that process. What could make more sense? Who knows more about the needs of people and their use of the internet than librarians? I mean, and it's not just I have access, I don't have access. It's what do I do with it? How do I use it? Where are the dangers? How do I register? There's a million questions, especially for people that have never really done that before. And who else does that besides libraries? In addition to that, they're being tasked with taking on the front end services of the other agencies. Well, we don't do customer support anymore. Just go to the library; they'll help you. Of course, they will, but you're not sharing those savings with the library to take on additional responsibility. It's classic, but nevertheless, it's a big deal, and I applaud you all. I wanted the other thing that I think Jamie just made the point was what a challenge it's been to provide information and communication in this time of rapid change and mass confusion about what's what. It's no wonder people have been upset. They feel like there should be, straightforward answers, but there aren't a lot of times as this virus keeps throwing us. And so I hadn't thought about that role for libraries in kind of being the information docent for this really important information, not to mention the access to it. What would you all say about your role within the state broadband, kind of touching back on this topic here of the role of the library in state broadband policy, access, usability, affordability. And so, Eli, can you start and we'll go back through and kind of each of you can kind of talk about this and what you think it is and what you see it could do.
Yeah, so I mean, my role on the Broadband Council for New Mexico is really the digital equity piece. So that's kind of what I've got my eye on. I'm watching the BEAD money, and sort of, I want to make sure that when we have access to digital equity funds, we know sort of where it needs to be allocated. Part of that, of course, is just sort of understanding, the gap between at least for libraries, we can build out the broadband infrastructure, which is great, but that's not the end of digital equity. It's not digital equity solved. There's equipment, there's access to software, there's access to training. We know how important it is for there to be a person there helping one-on-one. So we're, the trainings that we're hoping to do next year to roll out across all of our tribal libraries and across the Navajo Nation will be a combination of both high-tech trainings, in a group setting, but also one-on-one. I just recorded a podcast, incidentally, with our tribal librarian outreach on the Navajo Nation. Her name is Jeannie Whitehorse, and she's been doing digital literacy training on the Navajo Nation for 25 years now. This is her 25th year. And she was talking about how when she started, a lot of the people she was working with didn't know what a computer was, much less what the internet was. They'd take the mouse and hold it up in the air or try to turn it like this. It's really that understanding that digital equity is so much more than just the broadband and the equipment. It's the doing the librarian thing, and it's understanding in your state, we're trying to get we're designing trainings that will be specifically relevant to specific curricula at higher education institutions around the state. So we want someone to come to a tribal library, take a class on, say, how to do 3D animation through Unreal Engine or something like that. And then tell them if this is something that you are interested in and you like doing, there's a class at the Institute of American Indian Arts or at Navajo Tech that there's a whole class on this that you can go and take, and then there's this high-paying career that's potentially waiting for you. So I think that the council that the Broadband Council for New Mexico is heavily represented by has heavy representation by the construction people, the people who build the broadband. And so I kind of see it as my role and library's role to keep an eye on sort of, okay, what happens after the broadband? What is that entire digital equity ecosystem with all its nuance and all its localism as well? And then sort of making sure that all the connections that need to be made are made.
That's great, Eli. And you bring up a point. I'll just try to drop it in real quick here because we're running out of time. But it's the idea that librarians do so much in support. This is what it really means as form, and this is how you really do that. It points out the need to have better design of all these applications, all these government applications should consult with the libraries in the first place. Who has more experience on what users run into than the people who are supporting them in libraries? They need to bring the librarians in as they develop these user interfaces and systems to make them more user-friendly before it even gets to the library. But great story. Tamar, I'm going to ask Jamie to go next because I know he has to kind of hop off here, and then we'll have you for the big wrap-up. So Jamie, tell us, I mean, you already kind of told us, but give us a wider scope on the, you know, the state role in policy and development there?
Absolutely. We have a very close relationship with, it's called Connect Maine Authority, and now it's the new Maine Connectivity Authority that will be receiving the federal funding. And we're very certain that we'll be included in building that plan for the state when those funds come through. I think I can't echo enough what Eli said. You know, I'm talking about what's happening on the other side of that connection. There are so many people now involved in getting that last mile out to residents and building that out. And it's still going to take a couple of years, but at least those conversations and the funding to help back it up is happening. I want people to be talking about what do we do with that connection, and we're well positioned. I will say with Maine, and I kind of end with where I began, because of the Maine School and Library Network, we have a real value, I would say, to talk about what we do with the connection that's already coming into the library. So if there are kiosks or nodes that can be built that provide services from those connections, that fiber that's already been laid, we can provide value in discussing that in our communities. I think Maine is a perfect state for that.
That's a huge one, yeah. That's great. Is there a forum within your peers, within COSLA, to specifically focus on all this federal money and broadband? Is there? I mean, you have so many great stories that are happening. How are you sharing them? Is a vehicle for that across the states? Jamie, I'm asking you because you're still up.
Sorry. COSLA does its best to try to capture some of those stories. They did weigh in with NTIA and share stories. So, but you know, I think that's always going to be something that we can do better at, because there's just so much, and how do we articulate it in a concise way?
Sounds like a subgroup that I might suggest for COSLA forming a user group. Okay, Tamar, please bring us home here with how you see Maine broadband policy being impacted by your agency.
Well, I'm really excited that this has become a state issue and not a local issue where people are trying to patch together something, because that clearly has been too much of a burden on top of everything else that libraries have to do to be responsible for this. So it's a very exciting time that this is finally kind of coming, taking shape around a more unified response to the issue of broadband. The Maryland State Library Agency has asked one of our library leaders to take the lead on this on behalf of the agency, Carla Moore, who is deeply involved with urban library councils, digital equity, and issues of EDI at the Prince George's County Memorial Library System, is going to be our representative, along with Mike Freed, who is the head of technology for the State Library Resource Center. They're going to be speaking on behalf of libraries, and talking about what worked for libraries, what hasn't worked. But really, I think the biggest thing is going to be the focus on the digital literacy and communicating out information about any changes to broadband policy through the libraries. But the digital literacy is something that we've taken the mantle on and really kind of have the experience, have the expertise, and is something that plays to our strengths. But in Maryland, it's going to be really, I think, much more geared towards applications. So applying for jobs, applying for housing vouchers, applying for any sort of government programs, really focused on more the application of digital literacy for certain people, and then providing critical thinking skills and critical evaluation for school-age children.
Wow, that's a small job. Not. No, that's great. That's fantastic. I want to close out our formal session here. This, by the way, is the fifth and final. We're going to take a pause here in the State of the State series, but this now we have 15 presentations from state library agencies recorded. This will be recorded and up and available. And it's a treasure trove. We're going to be picking these up again in a few months. We'll turn to low Earth orbiting satellite connectivity for the next couple of months, so stay tuned on that. But if we were all together, which I hope we'll be again soon, please, everybody, unmute, if you would. Everybody, please unmute, everyone. If we were together and we had three excellent presentations like we've just had today, we'd be giving these fine people a round of applause. So that's what we're going to do right now, please. Everybody, thank you. That's great. So thanks again, you all. We'll hang out if anybody has time and interest. We'll hang for a little while after we close the recording, which I'd like to do now formally, and thank IFLA yet again for hosting and recording, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.